in particular situations, you may lose awareness and regress to total identification with some reactive pattern. And it could be the pain body. A hugely problematic area for many or most people is relationships of whatever kind or on whatever level. It's where people seek their happiness, and it's where many people find their unhappiness. And so I'm talking about both intimate relationships, somebody you live with, and I'm talking about other kinds of relationship also at work, other family members, relatives, friends, and even very brief relationships, because any interaction with another human being I'm using now relationship in a wider sense, any interaction with another human being is a relationship. You are relating to that person. And so it is, for many people, most of their, or a large part of their suffering or unhappiness, unfortunately, is derived from relationships. They tend to go wrong so often or present so many problems and obstacles. And it seems that human beings are just so terribly difficult. Except one. The one who is listening to these words. You remember the statement, know thyself, famous words of wisdom. Knowing yourself, there are two levels to knowing yourself. One is the level of mental, emotional, and reactive patterns that you display in your life, and the ability to be aware of them. That is one level of self-knowledge, of knowing yourself. That is the kind of thing that sometimes in good therapy sessions, if you have a good, aware therapist, can be helpful to become aware of that level in yourself so that you know what your predominant patterns are. Doesn't everybody know what their patterns? No. They are so identified with their patterns that there's no awareness left. And that usually means when a person is so unconscious, that unconscious, the definition of unconscious, the way we use it here in a spiritual sense, not in a clinical sense, I'm not talking about unconscious, but in a spiritual sense, unconscious is to be totally identified with thoughts and emotions. So there's no room for any awareness left. So you are in the grip of the thought, in the grip of the emotion, and often thoughts and emotions are linked, go together. They have you in their grip so that they basically, you are them, you are the emotion. And those people who are so unconscious, there are still millions around, you might have noticed. Often they have a tendency of seeking always there's always the people are always to be blamed out there. There's always people, they point their fingers at why these people are so bad and what they're doing to you or how awful they are. There's never looking at oneself. Jesus already had that statement. Why do you see what is the saying about the what? Yeah, you see a little splinter in the other person's eye, but you don't see the huge splinter that is in your eye. Very profound statement. So why don't you find that first, he says. So in other words, he says, know thyself. Be aware of your own patterns. And most people here have that awareness, but perhaps not all the time. For many of you, when you are challenged in a particular way, in particular situations, you may lose awareness and regress to total identification with some reactive pattern. And it could be the pain body. As you know, the pain body is old accumulated emotion that still I regard it as an almost autonomous entity that lives in you. It's a way of looking at it, but there's a lot of truth to this. There's an emotional field that lives in you almost as an entity, one could say. That sounds slightly spooky, but one could say that even a thought is an entity. When you think a thought, it is an energy formation. It is a little being that you give birth to. So it has a life. It depends for its life. It depends on you, on your life. But it is a little entity, and so in some forms of either deep unconsciousness or when mental illness, sometimes it can happen that the mind gets completely taken over by these little thought entities, and so you're totally occupied. Your mind is totally occupied. Another word for occupied is, I won't say it, it sounds too spooky. So you're totally occupied by these thoughts, they pretend to be you. So that is total lack of awareness. So it's essential for your spiritual growth to be continuously alert and vigilant, so that you are able to be there in the background, so to speak, as the awareness in your daily life, so that you're not completely taken over by the arising thoughts and arising emotions. When you interact with people, when you become upset about this or that, always any kind of upset or disturbance in your energy field can be very helpful. Do not believe that I shouldn't have this disturbance in my energy field, or I shouldn't be upset because I'm spiritual. I don't get upset about these things anymore. But honestly observe what arises, and then observe how does it arise. And as I already mentioned last night, very often you will find it is caused by certain thoughts in your mind, certain interpretations, certain reactions. It can also happen that a reaction comes so suddenly that it's just an emotion waiting to come up. An emotion, and this is what the pain body does, as you may know. The pain body is not necessarily always active in you. There are periods when the old emotional pain that you still carry around with you, is dormant, and then it leaves you in peace for a while, and then you are fine. You meet somebody, and this person is lovely, and it all goes fine, and you might spend some time together and it's still fine, and then you go on vacation together for the first time. And then there comes a moment when something else comes in that's not fine, either in you or through the other. And what happens in relationships? The pain body periodically needs to feed on a certain experience that corresponds to its energy field. The vibrational frequency of its energy field is a good external image of the pain body in, I think it's in Lord of the Rings, is this little being, I can't remember the name, goes and even the little being once was a normal being, according to the legend in this, it's kind of modern mythology. That being was once a normal, lovely human, and there is still, although this being has been completely taken over by what I call the pain body, occasionally there are still instances when the original being that's been completely taken over still shines through, and there's a little bit of tiny glimmers of awareness come in occasionally, and then you almost feel sorry for it. But then again, the pain body, and if you feel sorry and you give in, then immediately the pain body will take advantage of that. So that's a lovely modern mythological illustration of the pain body. So to observe that in yourself, in relationships, how it periodically comes up, either in your partner or in yourself, wanting some kind of drama, amplifying something little into something big, because it wants to feed on your partner's reaction. It wants the emotional negativity. It needs the emotional negativity from the other in order to suck it up. And then you give back of it to the others. The pain body, then mutually they energize each other. And that is unconscious. That is how many couples, most couples perhaps, unless there's already considerable consciousness there in both of them, or at least one of them, they go through that periodically, don't realize that that is what it is. And at first there are even people who feel they need that drama to feel that the relationship is still real. And that is, there comes a point when it gets too much. So then the pain that arises so often and so frequently, it gets too much. I can't live with this person anymore. And then you separate. But if the awareness hasn't come in so that you can be aware of your own pain body, what you contribute to it, then you will repeat the same thing in the next relationship. So the pain body needs to re-experience emotional pain through drama. And whoever it comes up first in, it is usually it's always recognizable by being an overreaction to something, an event, something you said, something you did, or something you failed to say, or you failed to do. But the person who is displaying the pain body does not know it's an overreaction. So only an outside observer or the other might see that it's an overreaction. But to the pain body, it seems a totally natural reaction. So you need to know what situations, there may be certain situations in your life that tend to trigger the pain body in your relationship or at work. There may be certain people that your pain body is susceptible to, resonates with. If you live alone, then the pain body has a little problem. What am I going to feed on? I can't have drama with myself, or can I? Yes, you can. You can have the drama in your mind. You can have a stream of destructive and negative thoughts in your mind, either about yourself or others. They may not be here, but you have the thoughts about them. They may be in your past. They may be dead. But the pain body, if there's nobody around that the pain body can feed on through negative emotion, it will feed on negative thought streams, your thought streams. And this is where the addiction to negative thinking comes from.
Welcome to the second part of this special video series on Conscious Manifestation 2020. In this second part, Eckhart Tolle addresses how once we've developed a level of presence and awareness of thoughts and emotions, how do we work with anxiety or fear that keeps erupting, that we keep feeling in our felt experience? Here's part 2 of Conscious Manifestation 2020 with Eckhart Tolle.
Now, what about the fear? What about the anxiety? The anxiety that has been in you. For many people, it's in the background most of their lives, some fear, some anxiety. And when they're being challenged, as now, the anxiety that is a kind of distant background noise for some people, is almost always there, but sometimes obscured, but then it's there again, that suddenly becomes very pronounced. This anxiety in the face of a challenge, the anxiety that had already been there in the background, the fear, that now comes out fully, and you are in the grip of it. And now you become aware of the link between your thought processes and your emotions. And you realize that your unconscious thought process, such as worry, actually fuel the emotion that we call fear or anxiety continuously. So a vicious circle arises, and then the emotion that you feel, which you tend to feel it in your stomach, in this area here, you feel it, a contraction, almost a painful thing dwelling in your stomach or solar plexus area. But it can affect the whole body. The whole body can be tense. It interferes with the harmonious functioning of your body. So this anxiety lowers your immune system on the physical level. Even mainstream medicine recognizes the fact that what they call stress, stress is mostly fear and anxiety, makes you much more lowers your immune system, and you're much more susceptible to illness. It doesn't mean if you're not anxious, you will never catch an illness, but you're much more susceptible to being sick when you are in an almost continuous state of stress or anxiety. So then the fear, of course, rises up back into your mind and creates more emotionally charged fearful thinking, which is not just fearful thinking, it's now emotionally charged fearful thinking. And that creates even more of that emotion. This is why it's called a vicious circle. The fearful thinking feeds the fearful emotion with energy. One could say the fearful thinking vibrates at the same frequency as the fearful emotion. So it is food that the emotion loves. So it wants more of it. Once you're under the grip of worrying, anxious thinking, you don't want to stop. Well, you might want to stop, but you're not even there when you're completely identified. It does not want to stop. So you are trapped in this fearful, vicious circle of emotion, fearful thinking, creating the emotion of fear, and the emotion of fear rising back up into your mind and creating a emotionally charged fearful thinking. And when you are in that state, you cannot think clearly. Whatever thought that arises, what do I have to do now? What can I do now? It's very unlikely that you will have a creative and a useful thought. Whatever your action you take on the basis of fearful thinking is likely to be not wise, not effective, and probably wrong, and leads to more suffering. In whatever way you interpret the world through the veil of fearful thinking, in whatever way you interpret the world when you're in the grip of fearful thinking, is going to be a complete misinterpretation. But to you, when you identify with it, it's the reality. So the first thing is to become aware of thoughts and emotions. And then, that means the awareness has arisen, it's there. Then once you recognize the futility and destructive nature of certain types of thinking, you're able to increasingly let go of it and replace it, not immediately necessarily with positive thoughts, but it's better to, because you still have the negative emotion there. So if you immediately replace the unconscious fearful thinking with positive thoughts, there's a conflict between the emotion that is still there, which is the fear, and the thoughts that are floating on top there. And you will feel that there's something not right, because the emotion says you're in a critical state, and your mind has a thought that, oh, all is well, life is good, I'm going to be abundant. It's unlikely that this will be effective. So again, realize what kind of thoughts go through your mind, recognize the futility and destructive nature of these types of thought, and then replace these thoughts, not immediately with positive thoughts, but with awareness. Replace, instead of engaged in negative thinking, be more present as much as you can, be more in the present moment, because after all, that's all there ever is. The mind doesn't seem to know that. All there ever is the present moment. There's nothing else ever in your life, so you might as well give it some attention. You might as well make it the focus of your life, because it unfolds in this now moment. Everything. Future never comes. It's always now. When the future comes, it's the now. When the past happened, it was the now. When you remember the past, you remember it now. When you think about future, you think about it now. There is only now. So you might as well give it your fullest attention, make it the focal point of your life, and then see what you can do with the so-called future. But first you need to come into a relationship with the now that is helpful, sane, and that is friendly. Become friendly with them. When you enter the now, you see the now is not really that is not a threatening place most of the time, except when there's an emergency happening, then you have to do something, an immediate life-threatening or whatever it is. But the now is actually a much more benign place than the mind would be able to recognize. But you need to have your awareness there. You need to be aware. You need to be present in the now in order to recognize that the now is can actually be your friend, and is not your enemy. The now is your friend. You become friendly with the present moment, and that's however. So you begin to cut the link between your thought processes and the emotion, because you let go of these fearful thoughts. You recognize their futility. Instead, you're much more present. Thoughts will occasionally still come in, and then you recognize them. Let go. Be more present. However, in that presence, the emotion of fear may not and probably will not immediately disappear, because it's been there for a long time. So even if you no longer fuel the emotion with your thinking, you become present, and you may notice, yes, I'm more aware of sense perceptions, the aliveness of this moment. You can see perhaps beauty in things where the things that you didn't even give any attention to before. However, you can also still feel this anxiety or fear living in you, still there. Even when you're no longer feeding it with your thoughts, you can still feel it. There it is. And that becomes part of your experience of the present moment, that anxiety. Now, what do you do with it? The normal tendency would be to say, I want to get rid of this. I shouldn't be feeling this. I don't want to feel this. And some people just cannot tolerate the anxiety, so they might go to their doctor and say, please do something about this anxiety. The doctor will then give you a prescription. In some extreme cases, those things may be temporarily helpful in some extreme cases, but a lot of the time you would have missed an opportunity, and that is the opportunity of evolving through facing pain or suffering. If you face the emotional pain that you feel, that it's anxiety or fear, and not try to run away from it, or say, I can't stand, become so uncomfortable. Being in your own skin can become so unpleasant and uncomfortable that you just want to run away, or say, please give me something so that I don't have to feel this anymore. But actually, it doesn't help to want to get rid of it. It just creates another layer of anxiety or problems on top of the emotion. Now, I suggest, as an alternative approach, is to make the emotion that you feel that still lives in you part of your experience of the present moment, and accept it in the way you accept the totality of the present moment. And that's a new way of living, a very powerful way of living, a very powerful way of connecting with a deeper level of consciousness in you, of finding enormous power that dwells in you, if you can accept the present moment as it is, internally, externally, and internally. So it's not going to kill you. The anxiety is there, but it's not going to kill you. It might kill you if you react to it and create further anxiety. And you then allow the anxiety to be there as it is completely. It's almost like saying, it sounds a little strange, it's almost like saying, I don't mind being anxious. Sounds very paradoxical. But it's a very interesting experiment you can conduct. Any form of unhappiness, of course, some unhappiness is telling you that something is wrong in your life. It's a different story. But habitual unhappiness that arises in you, no matter where you go and what you do, unhappiness arises in you. No matter where you go and what you do, fear and anxiety are there. This applies to countless humans on the planet. Now, as an experiment, as I said, what happens when they say, I don't mind being unhappy, I don't mind being anxious? But of course, you're not fueling the anxiety with your thinking, you're aware of your anxiety. So you've reached that step where you're no longer giving it further fuel or food, and you're becoming aware of the anxiety, and then you become and as you place your attention on it, which is part of the attention that's in the present moment, you become aware that there's very intense energy in that fear. It's like almost a burning energy in that fear. But the energy is not a flowing energy, it's trapped energy. It's like being in like a boiling kettle. You're holding the lid down. The energy is trapped, but there is enormous life energy in that fear. And if you can completely accept your fear at this moment, whatever, without feeding it any longer with your thinking, just being aware of it, say, that's what is. You may find in a very subtle way a change happening. And the change it's a transmutation of this energy of fear. When you accept it completely, a transmutation of this energy into intense presence. So the same energy that before was fear, when it's completely accepted, it suddenly goes. And there's enormous power that was in there, trapped. And suddenly it becomes fuel for your consciousness, becomes transmuted into presence or awareness. When it's completely accepted, and then it's no longer fear, it's just suddenly intense awareness. And that intense awareness is like one could almost say a higher intelligence that suddenly begins to operate in you. You're no longer just reliant on the conditioning of your mind. There's an intense presence there. And it doesn't mean it happens once and then it's never fear again. After that experience, you have to experiment. It may not last very long, the initial transmutation, then you may fall back into fear. And the fear may repeatedly try to rise back up into your mind and make you think fearful thoughts. And from time to time, it probably will succeed again. And you fall back into the same pattern. But then more and more, at shorter and shorter intervals, you wake up again and you realize that this is what's happening. And then again, you come to a place of just acceptance and then notice that the transmutation happens again. And this is how, it is not just fear, it can be with any kind of suffering in your life. When it's completely accepted, a transmutation begins to happen. And that is how suffering is actually an essential part of the evolution of human consciousness. Because if you reach a point where suffering can be transmuted into a higher consciousness, awareness or presence, it becomes fuel for presence. To achieve the state of enlightenment, as if it were something that you can add to yourself, or something that will suddenly transform you into a miraculous being, which you already are. But you won't know it if you think that is going to come in the future. Enlightenment, or let's call it the egoless state. Okay, I want to achieve the egoless state. And of course, the egoless state cannot be achieved in the future or in time. It is only by looking through it now that the egoless state is here now. A state that you want to achieve is a mental concept in which that's endowed with self. And as such, you can never reach it, because it's an abstract concept of who I want to be, not realizing you are it already. So the egoless state, it does not lie in the future. It has nothing to do with future. You cannot make it into a goal. You cannot make, whether you call it the egoless state or whether you call it enlightenment, you cannot make it into a goal. Goal implies future. Because the very entry point into the egoless state or the enlightened state is the present moment. If you make it into a goal that you want to achieve, you miss the entry point, because you're looking to the future, because goal implies future. And that is the dilemma of all spiritual seekers. Because they listen to spiritual talk or read a spiritual book and say, there is such a thing as the egoless state or the enlightened state, and perhaps I can achieve it too. And immediately they make it into a goal, project it away. It becomes mind, a mental image of who I want to be, future. And not realize that their very search to actualize that image prevents them from being it now. Because the entry point is here, this moment only. The ego can only be transcended through accessing the power of the present moment. No other way. Enlightenment is only in the power of the present moment. Nowhere else. So it's only humans who give up the search who realize it's already here. So you have to, one way or another, either because you're totally frustrated with the spiritual search, or because you suddenly see the truth of it, give up the search as if it were future. Now, this seems to conflict with certain teachings that say, basically there are two conflicting
spiritual teachings. One says, that seems what I've just said, but it's not quite it. One says there's nothing you can do and you might as well totally relax because you can't bring it about. There's nothing, absolutely nothing you can do about it. So let go, forget about all, some teachers say that, forget the whole thing, just have fun. The other teaching says if you do not want enlightenment as intensely as a drowning man wants air, you're not going to get it. Now, what I just said seems to be more towards the other, that is, you cannot make it into something to want or to get. But really, the truth is hiding if you bring the two together. And how does that look? How can you bring those together? On the one hand, there's nothing you can do, that's true. And on the other hand, an intensity is required. You bring the two together. The very intensity that is mistakenly interpreted as an intensity that's driving you towards a future goal can become an intensity that is driving you into the present moment. That's the uncompromising intensity of there's only this moment. And that, yes, there's an intensity there that takes you deeper into this. It's not an intensity that drives you into future. There's nothing you can do is true in the sense that if doing requires future and time, that doesn't help you. And of course, going into the present moment and becoming internally aligned with the present moment isn't really a doing. In that sense, there's nothing you can do. You can only allow the present moment to be and go deeply into it. It's a question of how you use language. But so in that sense, they are right. Yes, there's nothing you can do. And the others are also right. The intensity is required, the intensity with which you embrace the now. So there's the point. No future state. You're not becoming something that you are not now. And so you may have heard some spiritual teacher saying, you're enlightened already. And that's deep down, that is true. Every human being is already complete within. On the level of form, there are all kinds of things that perhaps you could still do and play around with and add to yourself and learn or experience. But in the depths of who you are, your essence identity is already totally complete. It doesn't require more time or more things to be added to who you are in your essence. And really that is what matters. In that sense, future can only prevent you from being it, finding it and being it now. So it's for some people hard to get rid of this idea, because it's no more than an idea in the head that I need to achieve something, become something. But it's not really true. So it's truer to say you are already it, you just need to realize it. That you are already fully yourself. You are already fully yourself. You don't need more time or more of anything to be who you are already now. You're already divine, timeless, eternal in your essence. Everything else is on the level of form, and it's a dance, a game, a play of form. There sometimes you get more and then you lose again. You can play. So no more spiritual seeking. Intensity, yes, but the intensity that drives you into the now. Not an intensity that wants to actualize an imagined state. Me as the enlightened one, which you already are.
My question is around before you were talking about intensification of presence. So at times I've felt intense energy in my body, throughout my body, but that's more rare. And it's I feel that I experience presence in more of an underlying calmness. So my question is presence experienced? Is there something consistent with presence?
Do you mean, does it always feel the same? Is that what you mean, perhaps? Well, as I said, the intensity of presence can vary. So presence is the energy field. Now, this is very hard to talk about, but I will make an attempt. It is almost as if there's a place inside from where presence emanates. And that place is timeless, and I can only compare it in the sense-perceived world. You could compare it to this, like the sun that continuously shines, and yet it has no form. So it's like a space, rather, out of which presence emanates. So the sun isn't actually positive presence, but if you imagine that the sun were an empty space out of which the light emanates, then you get a better, this is closer to the truth of how it is experienced as you go very deeply into it. So there is a space within, or a spaciousness, that is the point out of which the emanation of presence happens. And that space is absolute repose, absolute stillness, and to feel that in yourself is very joyful, for lack of a better word. There's an aliveness there, but it is absolutely still. That's the core, and that is, perhaps as I speak of it, you can get a sense within yourself what that is. You can only sense it when you're not thinking. You can't be thinking and sense that. That's the innermost stillness within you. Out of that emanates presence, which can emanate directly from the body, can also move into your mind and begin to use your mind and inform the mind and speak through the mind. There were times in my life when I was very passive. You know my episodes on sitting on park benches, but even after that, for long periods of time, I was so immersed in that inner stillness that there seemed no point in doing anything. And you don't need to go that way. I didn't have any guidance, so nobody could tell me what to do with that. So I gradually had to learn for myself that you can be active in the world and at the same time completely rooted in the stillness. So you particularly mentioned the state of calmness when you can feel it. So it may be that you have that connectedness with a still point within and feel that very strongly. It's very hard for people to, people also differ in their choice of words when they speak about it. So you could ask, if you go to India or you go to any Buddhist country, you may find that, ask them about spiritual awakening, you may find that the words they use to describe it are very, very different. And only if you know already from direct experience what it is they're talking about, you can recognize that they're talking about the same thing. So I've already said too much about it, because what I have said those words may not be what the words that you would choose to talk about your experience of presence. So, are you able to suspend thinking for certain moments without going to sleep?
I'm not sure.
Okay,
I think so.
Try it now. Okay, stop. Okay, how was that?
I don't remember a thought.
Okay,
Yeah.
so there was no thought.
Yeah.
Because not thinking is not memorable.
Okay.
Now, this is very significant. So the mind doesn't know what to do with not thinking because the mind is thought. The mind cannot really appreciate how important not thinking is, because what the mind is interested in is, let me ask another question. That's what the mind is interested in. It's not interested in stepping aside and allowing no thought to arise. So the mind has a certain momentum. The most important thing is to become familiar with that state of no thought. Far more important than any question that could arise in your mind or any answer that the greatest spiritual teacher could give you. So that's why I mentioned I believe in the New Earth, I was visiting that big center where they offer countless fascinating courses on developing this and that faculty and spiritual development and physical development, and all kinds of huge number of courses are offered. You can have anything, a menu of courses, you can pursue any interest, wonderful and fascinating. So I don't know if you remember reading it, I wrote, somebody came to me and showed me that program, that menu of fascinating courses and workshops. I said, which one do you think is most suitable for me? And I looked through and said, there's so many, I don't know. But I can tell you this, the way I put it at that time was, be aware of your breathing just for a few days, and you will gain more than attending any of these courses. And it's free. Be aware of your breath as you go through daily life as much as you can. What does that imply? That implies there's a space of no thought, because you cannot be aware of your breath and think at the same time. If you want rapid acceleration of spiritual awakening, don't ask another question, because the next question and the next and the next won't get you any closer, especially after. As you can see, I'm winding down question. Especially after being here for several days, I have said all that can be said about spiritual awakening. The next step is up to you, and it does not consist in, let me see. No, I need to know something else. I need to know. I know that some questions are helpful because but ultimately, the most essential thing is bring presence into your life now. For example, by being aware of your breath as much as you can. This is one way of bringing presence in. Or feel the inner body as much as you can. And that's rapid. Or if you can, just step out of thought already without using any of those portals, just move out of thought, and some of you can do that already, then choose that as much as possible in your daily life. Choose to be in thoughtless awareness whenever you don't actually need to think, and that's quite a lot of the time. That's the spiritual practice. There's no other spiritual practice. Everything else would point to that. But this is the most direct spiritual practice, and very rapidly you'll find the shift happening. You have a choice. Now, with choice comes responsibility, because the moment you have that choice, it implies that there is sufficient awareness in you for you to have choice. Once that has arisen, that choice becomes your responsibility. We have to look at it from that point of view, because if people ask me, well, who is responsible, presence or you, and all kinds of strange questions, the most useful approach is to see that you can choose to be present. That's your responsibility. Choose to be present in many, many situations in your daily life. Choose presence over useless thinking, for example. When you're in bed at night, when you wake up in the morning, when you're walking in nature or walking to work from here to there, or traveling on public transport, or sitting in your car, stopping at a red light, choose presence over thinking. You are able to do that. First, you have to remember that you have a choice. That comes one. Okay, I have a choice. And then exercise the choice and take your attention away from thinking and put your attention on attention itself. Become conscious of being conscious. From another perspective, which is also true and actually more true but less helpful, it is true to say that when you exercise your choice of being present, what is really happening is that presence is choosing to manifest through you. But what presence wants you is to feel that you can have that choice, because it helps it to manifest. Ultimately, there isn't you and presence. You are an aspect of presence. So, forget about what I just said. But exercise your choice to be present, no matter where you are. And if you lose it, fine. It's coming back again and again. Of course you will drift off again sometimes. You drift off into thinking. You may drift off into reactivity and find, and then come back. The moment you notice it, you notice that you've drifted off into reactivity, your choice is to come back. If you cannot come back directly by saying, okay, I'll just be present, then use either your breath to bring you back, use the awareness of the inner body to bring you back, use some conscious movement to bring you back, or use sense perception to bring you back. Looking without labeling. It's all the especially natural things are helpful. You look at them, look at your dog. He's not thinking. So, and immediately, it's so easy to be present with an animal, with nature, with the sky. You can use those things as help. So if you need some additional help to be present, use that. I sometimes call that a portal into presence. There was a man working with Byron Katie, a spiritual teacher. The man was saying, if I had enough money, I would move to Hawaii, and that would be so great. That's my dream. And she said, well, what would you do in Hawaii? I said, well, I would sit in a deck chair by the beach or in my backyard and look at the palm trees, breathe. And she pointed out to him, well, where are you sitting now? Is the chair comfortable? Yeah. So what's wrong with that chair? How different would it be to have just a slightly different view around you? You can be in Hawaii now. It's an inner state. It's just the mind telling you you need to be somewhere else in order to be happy. You need to be somewhere else. It's here now. Why seek, postpone fulfillment to some future imagined point, not realizing that the source of all satisfaction is within you already. And then sense that as your very presence. And everything else, whatever happens or doesn't happen, you catch the bus or you miss the bus, you lose money, you gain money, up and down, hot and cold, that's all the details.
We talked about it off the top, right? Are you one of those people who worries about everything, what happened yesterday, what's happening tomorrow, and your mind just keeps going and going and going and going, and there's always somebody in your life that says, you gotta live in the moment. You gotta live in the moment. If you worry so much about yesterday and today, you're missing the now. Well, chances are, your friend who told you that read our next guest book, because he can help teach you live in the moment. Millions of people have read his work. Oprah loves him. Spiritual writer, teacher, Eckhart Tolle will be right here. Here's his bio.
You may have noticed that already.
And it's all summed up in Eckhart's enormously successful book called The Power of Now. He wrote it in Vancouver, where he currently resides. That thing came out over 10 years ago and sold more than 5 million copies. Yeah, thanks in large part to this person. She's also a big fan of Eckhart's follow-up book, A New Earth. It was one of her book club picks.
This is the most exciting thing I've ever done.
And last year, she made it the basis for 10 weeks of seminars with Eckhart on Oprah.com.
Thank you.
Everybody say hello to Eckhart Tolle. Thank you so much. It's great to see you, man. How are things? When you first published that book, Power Now, with small independent publisher, 3,000 copies, I can imagine you would have no idea that this was going to happen to you.
No, I thought the book would only appeal to people who are already deeply into spirituality or had been meditating for many years. And after about 3 or 4 months after it got published, I realized that many people were phoning and writing in to tell me they'd bought more than one copy for friends or relatives. Mm-hmm. And then I began to realize that it was a kind of snowball effect and that it would be growing and growing. That was a surprise. Another surprise was that for quite a few people, that was the first spiritual book they had ever read. And it made sense to them. Mm-hmm. And so I hadn't realized the degree of readiness in people for this message. And that was the surprise. And then more surprises came later. Mm-hmm. The book became what one reviewer called an underground bestseller for a while.
Usually in music, underground means people like it, but no one buys it.
Well, here underground means people buy it, but it's not. There's no publicity. There's no advertising. Nothing on television about it, and so word of mouth. Mm-hmm. So it grew for about a year and a half. It grew through word of mouth. Gradually, it got to some cities. There was a time, at that time, I would take a few copies of the book to little spiritual bookstores in Vancouver every couple of weeks, and then they would phone me again and say, we need another 5 copies. Mm-hmm. I would carry 5 copies.
You did it yourself?
Yes.
That's fantastic.
And that was enormously satisfying to have this personal contact with the book. And at that time, also, there were not that many readers. People could phone in and say, oh, I'd like to meet you. And said, okay, what time do you want to meet? And then as it grew, after a while, I couldn't do that anymore.
Yeah. Rule number 1, man, if someone wants to meet you on Facebook, don't. That's the trick. I bet you did you have horror stories? When you met somebody and you went, oh, I got to get out of here.
No, nothing that comes to mind. But the book does seem to, not only The Power of Now, also the later book, A New Earth, for some reason, it does seem to upset some people. Mm-hmm. I remember my office they told me, they don't show it to me, but they told me they opened one package and somebody had shredded the entire New Earth book and sent it in the shredded version back to my office. So something must have triggered something in him.
Well, if you go back a few decades, you're 29 years old, a fateful night? Is that what started this whole thing?
Yes, a night when I'd had many unhappy nights, but that night I was just so deeply depressed again, and I'd spent the previous weeks in anxiety, and what happened, a thought came into my head which said, I can't live with myself any longer. And at that moment, a separation happened between myself and that thought, and I looked at the thought and said, I can't live with myself. What does that mean? There must be two of me. There's an I, and there must be some unhappy self that I cannot live with. Mm-hmm. And through that, although I only understood the full implications years later, a separation happened between the unhappy self, which I later realized is a mental construct consisting of repetitive unhappy thoughts about me and my life, an unhappy story. I was continuously retelling myself the unhappy story of me. And I was so identified with the unhappy story of me that there was no gap between that and me. And that was the self that I couldn't live with. And when I realized that there is a self I can't live with, something separated, and I became the consciousness behind the unhappy self. And I could see that the whole structure of the unhappy self was a kind of fiction, a narrative that I was kept repeating in my mind. So the separation happened, and I realized that in essence, I am not my story, whether happy or unhappy. I'm the consciousness behind the story. The consciousness or the space, whatever you want to call it, there's not really a name for it. And I suddenly realized myself as that, and with that, I was in a state of peace. From then onwards, I never again identified with this unhappy mental construct, the me with its story. And that's what I call now the shift in consciousness that happened. Or you could also call it an awakening. Mm-hmm. So, and then later it became the teaching, because I tried to explain. After a few years later, people started coming to me, just casually asking questions. And gradually a spiritual teaching developed, but it's all based on that disidentification from this continuous stream of thinking that you take to be yourself, but it's no more than a stream of thinking. It's not who you are in essence.
Well, one thing we know, but however it is we are or we act, ultimately we are all affected by where we come from. That sort of sets the table for who we're going to be in the next phase of our life. And I wondered, for you to get to that point, what were your folks like? I never hear about what your childhood was like that would have set these sort of dominoes up for them to come falling down that one night.
Well, the childhood was already unhappy. There was always almost continuous conflict in my parents' marriage. And I was the only child, which makes it even more difficult, because if you have siblings, then you can kind of relate to them. And so I suffered a lot, I think the beginnings of the deep unhappiness and depression are probably there. But again, I'm glad now that it did happen, because otherwise the shift wouldn't have happened.
You know, the idea of being in the now, it's something that my friends, they've sort of stopped asking me to be in the now because they recognize it's not a reality for me, because so much is like, I'm sort of in the now, but I'm going here and trying this. The one thing we know is that our society is constructed in a way where we have a history and we have things to look forward to. How do you almost approach the unlearning of a people to change the way that this structure, that this society is built? This society is built on, here's my past, learn from my past. If I don't learn from my past, I'm doomed to repeat the mistakes. How do you put all that together, realizing how society is?
Well, this is all true. Of course, it's good to learn from one's past mistakes. On the other hand, if you identify with your past and your memories, and that forms the basis for your sense of self, that becomes a kind of prison. So nothing wrong with learning from the past, but a very essential thing is the realization that your life is always this moment. Your life is never not this moment. And whatever you think or experience has to be in the now. So life and now are actually inseparable.
It's tomorrow never comes, right?
Yes, when it comes, it's today. As they said in the British pub, there was a sign which said, "Free beer tomorrow."
And that is so unfair to drunks. That is so unfair to drunk people. You said Tiger Woods lives in the now, right? That Tiger Woods is a great example of the now?
Yes.
What's the difference between being in the now and just being simply focused? Because when I watch him golf, he golfs like a man who's chasing something. So what's the difference between in the now and being focused?
I don't think he's chasing anything. I think he is present. There's a nice story of a Zen master who was watching a sports person perform, and he was watching very closely, and the person wasn't quite making it, and the Zen master observed him and said, the need to win drains him of power. The need, because if you have the need to win, now the West of course subscribes to that. It says you must want to win, but that's not the Eastern way, and I believe that that's the truer way, because the need to win, you project a goal to some future moment. You cannot fully be present in what you do if you have the need to win. You want to get there.
But if you're a pro athlete, you only have to win, right? That's the challenge.
But the great ones, when they actually perform, when they are, as the expression goes, in the zone, they don't think about winning. They're absolutely and totally present. And so I believe that's where mastery arises, in that state of absolute and complete presence. There's also a nice film, The Legend of Bagger Vance, where it's about a golfer who learns to be present.
You said that there are certain people or things that are better at being in the now than others. You said animals are great at being in the now, but then you also said women are better at being in the now than men. Is that true?
Yes, to some extent. The women are not quite as much in their head as men. Women tend to be, they are in their head too, but not quite as much. They tend to be still a little bit more connected with the body, the energy in the body, with their feelings. So they're not as mind identified, not quite as, there are of course always exceptions, not quite as mind identified as man, and therefore it's a little easier. And so for many talks that I've given, there's always more women than men. This is beginning to change a little bit occasionally now, but still the case.
And the New Earth is just taking the idea of the power of now to a much bigger level, right?
Yes, new perspectives on it, and an elaboration, and a new, also indicating what it is that prevents you from being present. Structures in your mind, the ego, the identification with the voice in the head, to become aware of that. If you're not aware of it, it'll take you over again and again.
I know you've got a lot of traveling to do. When you come back to Canada, please come back on our show.
Thank you.
Lots more to talk about. EckhartTolle.com is his website, and there's a lot more to see with what he's got going on. And of course, he's got them books. Good to see him. Thank you. Eckhart Tolle, everybody. Thank you very much for watching the program tonight. There's an awful lot more to come. Thanks for watching. That's time.
No need to think right now. There's nothing to add to this moment by thinking about it. So all that thinking would do is obscure your awareness of the present moment, which means obscure your awareness. If you have problems waiting for you, you can think about them when we finish. And even then, I would suggest and recommend that you set aside brief periods when you think about your so-called problems, if they are real. In other words, a real problem is a situation that you need to deal with, either right now, in the moment when it arises, in which case it's not a problem, it's a challenge, or something that tomorrow you may have to do, or next week, or next month, and you may have to think about what you're going to do to the extent to which it's possible to plan, and set aside a period of time when you do that. And then, when that's done, come back into present moment awareness. So the worst fate is for your mind to be occupied continuously with past and future. And as you know, past and future exist in the mind. Remove the mind, thought, there's no past or future. Past or future exists for you as thought. It's indispensable for dealing with the practical aspects of life, but it's a huge obstacle for going deeper within yourself, deeper into reality, a huge obstacle to finding that state of connectedness with that deeper reality, a huge obstacle to knowing who you are. So right now, all you need to do, and there's no doing, we just use a word, all you need to do is look at the image on the screen, listen to the words, which are all pointers, signposts. And as you look at the image on the screen and listen to the words, be aware also of yourself as the still space. The still presence. Without which you would not be able to look at the image on the screen or listen to the words. It's only because there is that light of presence that receives the sense perception of seeing and hearing that there can be seeing and hearing. The moment you start thinking about past and future, the moment you start thinking, some of your consciousness incarnates into form. the incarnation. I believe carnation comes from flesh, carnal. The word incarnation is to become form, to become physical form. But it's not necessarily physical. You become a psychological form. Every thought is that. So some of the consciousness incarnates into mental formations. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a good thing that you're able to think. It's not a good thing to lose yourself in the thinking. Why is it not a good thing? Because it makes your life miserable. And if you make your life miserable, you make other people's lives miserable without even knowing what you're doing. That's the essence of unconsciousness. The really unconscious people, which is still millions, billions on the planet, they don't know that they are making their lives miserable and other people's lives miserable.